All right, hello linguists, hello Ling1111. This will be a very quick revision of what we have done so far. So I will try to do this in 5 minutes. Right, so we talked about linguistics and language. Linguistics is the scientific study of language. Scientific meaning having certain knowledge. So what do we know about language? We know that we have a specialization for language. Specialization for language means that we come to this world equipped with certain organs and certain parameters that we can use to speak and to produce, to perceive language. For example, we have language capacity in our brain. We have all the speech organs necessary for producing language, such as lips, teeth, tongue, right? No, nostrils, even lungs, and so on and so forth, and of course vocal folds, right? So all of these are our features, human features for producing, that enable us or allow us to produce language. And we have this specialization for language. We are also equipped with linguistic competence, which is a subconscious knowledge of grammar or oral language. And most of the time, this knowledge is inaccessible. So there is a property that we call inaccessibility. Remember the WAGs that we drew in our class. So if you have one WAG, then you have another one WAG, then there are two WAGs. How do you know that we need to place S there? Well, our knowledge is inaccessible and it's subconscious. And if we say, for example, in English, the plural of nouns is made by adding S to the noun, then that's a specific property of grammar of English. And that's a property that we call generality. Every single grammar has some kind of its own property, right? Every language has its own property, and that's a generality. On a more universal scale, there is a property we call universality. Universality is a property which says all languages share certain features. For example, all languages have vowels and consonants. And all languages are equal, or all grammars are equal. There's no better or worse grammar. All grammars are equal, and we call this parity. We, as human beings, are very creative with our language all the time. Remember the verb we stand somebody, like we follow somebody from Eminem's song. This word was invented back then, and it's being used these days. I've recently heard a new word which is called an assi instead of a selfie, which means that we are doing the selfie, right? The two of us at least. So it's called an assi. And grammars can change. Of course, it needs for the change, it takes a lot of time. So you need a lot of time for that. And then we call this mutability. For example, mutability can be traced in the Middle English or Old English even. For example, English negatives used to be formed by inserting the little word ne. Now that word is gone, right? And it's changed and it's replaced with certain some other properties. We also talked about descriptivism and prescriptivism. As linguists, we try to be descriptive, to describe language, not prescribe rules. For example, don't end a sentence with a preposition. That's a prescriptive rule, right? And we are trying not to be prescriptive in linguistics, but you have to be aware of both of these terms. And I posted this little link to where Stephen Fry's nice way of just talking about this myth of prescriptivism. And please take a look at it. Then we moved on to phonetics. What's phonetics? Phonetics is a linguistic discipline that studies the speech sounds and intonation. We divide phonetics into articulatory, acoustic, and perceptual phonetics. Articulatory phonetics is the basically branch of phonetics or a discipline within the phonetics that deals with, or that studies the way we produce speech and the way the speech sounds are produced. What kind of speech organs we're using, for example, for that. The acoustic phonetics is the study or some discipline of phonetics that studies the way sound is transmitted from a speaker to a listener, and perceptual phonetics is the subdiscipline of phonetics that talks about how we perceive speech sounds and intonation, right? One of the main tools of phonetics is phonetic transcription. It's the way we represent speech sounds in writing, right? We want to be able to represent all speech sounds in the world and to scientifically approach them. We've talked about trouble with English. For example, George Bernard Shaw's example of a fish that can be written in a very different way, right? So there are lots of troubles with English spelling system, and that's why our phonetic transcription alphabet of choice is the International Phonetic Alphabet, or IPA. All right, so we talked about IPA and its properties and its principles, but we also talked about sound producing system, and IPA is actually based on these. So sound producing system consists of lungs, trachea or windpipe, right? Larynx and vocal folds within larynx, pharynx as well, oral cavity, nasal cavity. Oral cavity consists of lips, teeth, alveolar ridge, hard palate, soft palate, velum, uvula or uvula, and tongue, right? So all of these are parts of oral cavity, and nasal cavity consists of our nostrils and what's inside the nose, right? Usually cavity, right? And I posted this link towards a nice little video about how the human body produces voice and speech. With that in mind, we talked about consonants. So now that we know all the organs that produce this, we want to describe consonants in a certain way, right? So consonants can be described with a set of attributes. Those attributes are voicing, whether our vocal folds are voicing or actually vibrating or not. If they're vibrating, then we are talking about voiced sounds or voiced speech sounds, such as z or zh. If they're not vibrating, then we talk about s or voiceless speech sounds. Then the next attribute of consonants is a place of articulation. That is the location of where you are making this consonant. For example, p is made with both lips touching, right? T is made with your tongue touching the alveolar ridge, and so on and so forth. And finally, manner of articulation, and that is how we produce sounds, whether there is a friction, whether there is a complete stoppage of air, whether there is just a little bit of constriction, as in glides or not. So those belong to the manner of articulation. And finally, we talked about vowels. Vowels can be described in terms of the tongue height, tongue frontness, where the tongue is in your mouth, right? Is it high, as in E, or is it low, as in A? Is it front, as in A, or is it back, as in U, right? Then we talked about tenseness, which is the general degree with which we tend to produce certain vowels. There are tense and lax vowels. Tense vowels are usually the vowels that are at the end of our vowel space, which we will see in the next slide. And lax vowels are generally produced with more easiness, right? With lower degree of tenseness. So for example, think about E and I, or think about A and A, right? So A would be tense and A would be lax. And finally, we talked about roundedness, which describes vowels in terms of whether the lips are rounded or not. So for U, my lips are obviously rounded. U. For E, they are not. And that those are the properties of consonants and vowels. Finally, we presented the IPA chart of English phonemes, of course. You can see on the chart that there is a manner of articulation for consonants and place of articulation. So manner of articulation, consonant can be a stop, as in P. A consonant can be a labial or bilabial, as in P or B. A consonant can be voiceless or voiced, as in, for example, P is voiceless and B is voiced. All the sounds on the left are voiceless and all the sounds on the right are voiced. So that's how you will interpret this chart. And finally, we have the English vowel space here presented. We can see which ones are high, mid, or low, and which ones are front, central, back, and which ones are lax, all of this inside, and all of the rest are tense, and which ones are rounded. Just these four for us right now at this point. This is by no means a complete chart. This is by no means a complete, even a complete English IPA chart. Is just what we want to learn at this point. Okay, this was a very quick review. Thank you for watching and practice.